Hi, I'm Manuela, a program manager on the PowerApps customer advisory team. We work with customers to help them accelerate their adoption of the Power Platform at enterprise scale. In this session, we'll share some lessons learned and best practices when adopting the Power Platform at enterprise scale. We will share strategies, best practices, and tooling approaches that have helped land well-managed, low-code powered digital transformation. We will share customer stories on their approaches to embrace Power Platform adoption at scale and drive agility and cost savings in the process. The digital innovation at these organizations represents a shift in mindset where empowerment, enablement, and inclusion are at the core of the transformation strategy. This is the IT landscape before low-code. Adoption processes used to be different, as each silo, each column holding up the organization was a multi-year or decade effort. Often, organizations would form around these columns rather than providing evolving automation to the organization and its current needs. Sometimes these pillars were old and organizations were scared to make any changes for fear of the unknown or what might break. But in the shadows, between these pillars, other business applications grow in the cracks because the business users have needs that aren't met by the big systems. These could be spreadsheets, SharePoint lists, Access databases, basically anything that the users can get their hands on to try and make their life easier and better. And sometimes these applications would grow beyond even the expectation of the people or the team that created them. This is the goal of today's talk, to discuss the framework for successful adoption, management, and governance of the Power Platform, so these applications can thrive, but in a way that will ensure the organization and each team making them can be successful, secure, and adhere to agreed upon governance. Things are changing dramatically for application development, BI, and automation. In the next 5 years, there'll be more applications built than in the last 40 years. The demand for mobile apps is one of the reasons for this, and there's a huge backlog in enterprises for building apps. It is now more important than ever to empower new and different talent to become developers, and that's where low-code comes in. Before we dive into some of the customer stories, let's talk a little bit about the roles and responsibilities of a Center of Excellence. We think of a CoE as a coordinating function that ensures the Power Platform strategy is aligned with the digital transformation strategy of your organization. Establishing a CoE means nurturing organic growth whilst maintaining governance and control. A key principle is to clarify why you're setting up a CoE, what you aim to accomplish, and the key business outcomes you hope to achieve. Then get started and learn and evolve along the way. For many, the CoE is the first step in driving innovation and improvement, and through its central function can really break down geographic and organizational silos to bring together like-minded people with similar business goals to share knowledge and success, experiment and encourage each other, whilst at the same time providing standards, consistency, and governance to the organization. Establishing a Center of Excellence doesn't mean immediately standing up a whole new team. You can start small and evolve with your adoption. Secure by establishing data loss prevention policies and managing licenses and access to data sources. Evangelize by providing a community space on Yammer or SharePoint with a collection of links for other people to start their learning. And then monitor your usage, see who is creating apps, what apps are being created, and how they are used, and evolve your CoE strategy with those learnings. A great example of an organization that started small and evolved with their learnings is Standard Bank, who started their Center of Excellence 2 years ago with 2 people and have evolved it to a team of 25 now. Standard Bank is the largest bank in Africa, with 12 million customers and 54,000 employees. They've been using the Power Platform since February 2017, so really early adopter of the platform. They've now got over 400 solutions being created for a variety of business needs, ranging from finance to operations to HR. They're enabling business-led innovation by laying the security foundations upfront and creating an innovation-friendly culture. They approach their journey to digital transformation from all angles. Bottom-up, introducing digital literacy, making these tools more approachable and enabling each user to help themselves. Top-down, also increasing executive literacy and ensuring the leadership team creates an innovation-friendly culture. And cross-functional, really creating a hype for these solutions, sharing success stories, and being bold in the solutions they're trying to build. Independent of how big or small your Center of Excellence is, these are the key responsibilities that you would tackle. Now we've talked about what it takes to establish a CoE, let's talk about some of the roles and responsibilities involved. The low-code strategy team represents the key decision maker and ensures the Power Platform strategy is aligned with organization goals. They're also responsible for adoption and change management and looking at new ways of working across the organization. The Power Platform admin team is responsible for establishing an environment strategy, setting up DLP policies, and managing users, capacity, and licensing. They're also looking at making data available to makers through connectors, integration, or migration. The Power Platform Nurture team, and this can consist of your champions, organizes App in a Day events, hackathons, and provides mentorship to makers to ensure they get off to a really good start. They're also looking at evangelizing the platform. There's also going to be the need to look at automating tasks, setting up automations through Azure DevOps, supporting architecture reviews with makers, and creating and sharing common templates and reusable components. So we definitely see a function dedicated to reusable assets and automation as well. And then there's the user support team. You will already have an established IT ticket support process, and it's important to onboard those teams as well, create guidelines and FAQs, and figure out how your existing support processes and resources fit in with this new low-code world. And for all these responsibilities, there's a set of personas that are typically involved. Your makers and champions, of course, your IT department, enterprise architecture, information security, service management, application lifecycle management, your help desk, and possibly existing business change management teams. These are the 4 delivery models we see for the Power Platform, but keep in mind that each of these is just a mental model. Every organization has a variation of multiple models along this continuum. For example, even if you opt for a centralized model, where all requirements are coming into a central delivery team, you will still have citizen developers discovering the platform and building apps for their teams. So you will have elements of Matrix or BizDevOps regardless. These models can help you consider what your current software delivery model is and how Power Platform might overlay into it, or how your current model might evolve to accommodate the rapid development capability enabled by the Power Platform. In the centralized model, you create central teams of product owners, citizen developers, pro developers, architects, change agents, and project managers. With this model, you create a central team of talented people that can pick up development of apps based on organizational properties. Your team might include some members who specialize in specific parts of the Power Platform, such as Power Automate, Power BI, or the Power Apps component framework. Or they could specialize in third-party integration, artificial intelligence, and Power Virtual Agents. In the decentralized model, you can create multiple teams across the organization that are close to the day-to-day running of various teams. They will have various resources to deliver apps consistently within organizational guidelines. Each team can run autonomously, and they can split and grow in a cellular fashion. However, with this model, you will still need centralized governance into the IT pro teams so that security, organization policies, and support can be provided for the apps that are created. With the Matrix model, you mix the best of both. You will have a centralized team of trained and certified specialists on the Power Platform, and then you will have leaders of change, design, delivery, and architecture, as well as specialized trainers to train local teams across the organization. Local teams made up of citizen developers are plugged into the centralized structure to make sure nothing is getting lost in translation between the people doing their day-to-day jobs and using the apps that are being built. With this model, you can scale into the hundreds and thousands of people working on app creation. Rapid app development can only happen at the speed that operations, such as IT, can support the apps being created. BizDevOps is a holistic relationship between app makers and operations that work in a virtuous loop. For this to work, all teams need to have a clear vision of the digital culture the organization is moving towards. To get the maximum value from the apps that are being created, they need reliable support, governance, and maintainability. As technology evolves, updates will need to be made on the apps to keep them current. Having not only an awareness of change, but a plan is key to success. Let's look at 2 customer examples here. First, Schlumberger, where Ellen drives their digital transformation team, and Led is responsible for enterprise mobility management. They have centralized IT teams looking at various complex projects and apps, as well as decentralized teams, so-called digital cells, that are part of the business unit and manage the digital transformation of that business unit. The governance and security model comes from a central IT place, and the decentralized digital cells adhere to those policies, but manage their own backlogs, support structure, and journeys. Additional to that, Schlumberger have also enabled self-service through personal productivity environments. Another customer example is Chevron, who made the Power Platform adoption truly part of their digital transformation journey. Chevron Corporation is a multinational energy corporation active in more than 180 countries. They went all in with their Power Platform adoption and really looked at not just solving one business problem, but building 1,000 apps to solve many business problems. their goal became to enable the business to be excellent at scale. And in order to achieve that, they've established a Power Platform DevOps team that's looking at automation and environment provisioning, a Power User and Development Support team that's helping innovators with patterns and practices, templates, and guidelines, and an organization capability team that's supporting the business with learning and readiness via community and training. Within a year, they have business units and functions across the globe use the Power Platform with over 40,000 unique users across all of their applications. Let's now look at some of the responsibilities of a Center of Excellence in a little bit more detail. Strategy and vision ensures change initiatives are delivered consistently. There's executive sponsorship and a dedicated Power Platform owner. This bucket is responsible for proving value, educating across the organization, and coming up with a strategy of how, who, and what will be moved to the Power Platform. Looking back at Schlumberger, they are creating value through a Center of Excellence across these 4 pillars. Community, promoting awareness, self-service, and business outcomes. Governance, to manage environments and master data, as well as security and data loss prevention policies. Self-service, providing training, resources, best practices, as well as, really importantly, reusable components. And the empowerment part, on-demand UX, devs, support, and solution architecture. Another important responsibility of a Center of Excellence is the administration and governance. Admin and governance ensures digital guardrails are in place so that makers can confidently create. It means managing the environments, users, capacity, and licenses, securing the platform, monitoring resources and usage, and setting up alerts to act on specific behavior. Beyond the out-of-the-box capabilities, you've got the Center of Excellence Starter Kit, which is maintained by the PARP's Customer Advisory Team, and it represents what we've learned from some of the largest organizations that we work with. However, installing it is not a checkbox exercise. It's a tool that's intended to be a starter kit for your departments to enable your processes. It can help with the how, once you've established the what and the why. Some of the data and foundation you'll likely need is in here, but your organization will undoubtedly want to tailor this for your own use. As you do, we would love to incorporate your innovations back into the tool. I'll be showing the Center of Excellence Starter Kit throughout the presentation today too, and we'll have a demo as well at the end. One of the components of the CoE Starter Kit is a DLP policy editor. It means you can edit your DLP policies and adjust them to see the impacts on applications in real time versus breaking the application. So you can update the policy in the app, you can reach out to the app owner to inform them of a change to the DLP policy and ask them to either adjust the application or move it to a different environment. Another component of the CoE Starter Kit is a Power BI dashboard that allows you to gain deep insights into how your organization is adopting the Power Platform. One element of it is monitoring connector usage. You can see how data is being used, who is using it, which apps and flows and makers are using which connectors together, and you can drive actions based on those insights. The CoE Toolkit also gives administrators a summary view of all the applications in their environment. You can identify sources of apps, who's making them, which departments are creating them. You can find pockets of success. You can identify apps that are broadly shared or broadly used, reach out to the app makers to get a better insight into how to better support those applications. And you can also perform application risk assessments. This aggregates data from across the platform to help you evaluate orphaned apps, those where the owner has left the organization, find apps that are based on a template, for example, during a training and evaluation exercise that are not used anymore. You can also use it to identify implicitly shared connectors and ensure they are being used properly. The CoE Toolkit also provides the structure for an application review cycle. For example, you can use this capability to implement a review policy for applications that are shared with more than a certain number of users or teams. Apps that are crossing a threshold from small team-based applications to larger enterprise usage. And you can ask the makers to provide additional details such as a business justification or the impact of an outage to you as an administrator. You can then assess the risk of that application and choose the best possible support model for that application. An essential part of establishing a Center of Excellence is nurturing your makers and creating an internal community. You'll want to share best practices and templates, onboard new makers. You'll build a training plan, share success stories, identify champions that can later on form mentors or trainers, and make it easier for makers with all backgrounds to get started. We look at another customer story here. SNCF operates France's national rail service and is a global leader in passenger and freight transport services. And they're redefining the role of IT in this new world. For them, it's essential to reposition IT departments around specific themes, providing meaningful app references, best practices, exposing important information through APIs, and upskilling the IT infrastructure and support staff to become expert solution creators. They've got a thriving Yammer community with over 2,500 members, and they've created a digital school with online and on-site training for the Power Platform. Another great customer example is Telstra, who've established a Power Factory. They're supporting their citizen developers through the business with Power Platform education and upskilling. They've got a delivery pipeline looking at opportunities, defining problems, and designing solutions, as well as iterating over the value of those solutions that are being built. They're unlocking the Power Platform capabilities to enable the delivery pipeline and the Telstra Power user community. Simon from GSK has done a fantastic job of creating an internal community. They have now over 2,000 members in 51 countries across pharma, consumer health, vaccines, and central business functions. He sees the value in sharing knowledge and passion and breaking down geographic and organizational silos. Their Power Platform strategy is focused on curating learning materials, curating reusable resources, helping end users create attractive user interfaces and good user experiences, as well as improving the measurement of business values of what they create. Additional to the customer stories that we've mentioned throughout the presentation, here's a list of customers who have shared their experience at our events such as the Microsoft Business Application Summit and Ignite. Let's now look at a deep dive of the CoE Starter Kit. A CoE requires much more than the tools alone. It requires people, communication, and defined requirements and processes, and likely a cultural change. However, the right tools can help you get started with planning your strategy of adopting the Power Platform at scale. The CoE Starter Kit is a set of components, so apps, flows, and dashboard, that represent a templatized implementation of best practices. It's owned by my team and influenced by what we've seen in the wild, what we've seen successful customers implement. Adopting it can give you the ability to better administer the platform with a dashboard that gives you full visibility, ability to govern with a sample audit process, the ability to nurture with a template catalog to share best practices, and a welcome email to onboard new makers. It can help you with the how once you've established the what and why. We will now dive deeper into some of the components of the CoE Starter Kit. The CoE Starter Kit is shipped in 3 components. The core component solution provides components that you need to get started with setting up a CoE. They sync all of your resources into entities and build admin apps on top of that help you get more visibility into the apps, flows, and makers that exist in your environment. Additionally, apps like the DLP editor and the Set New App Owner help you with daily admin tasks. The core component solution contains assets that are only relevant to the admin. Multiple governance components help you establish audit and compliance processes and are provided as part of the governance component solution. Not all of these might be relevant to your organization, and you should carefully evaluate and establish your processes before looking at the tooling. Another part of the CoE Starter Kit is the nurture components. Multiple nurture components help you establish a community and run internal training events. Again, not all of these might be relevant to your organization. You really have to evaluate which ones are and then identify and establish them in your organization. Let's now dive into a demo. One of the key principles of administrating the Power Platform is having full visibility into how your organization is using Power Apps and Power Automate. Insights into your adoption will help you govern and secure the platform, identify patterns, and enable you to nurture your makers to accelerate adoption. Out of the box, the admin analytics that are part of the Power Platform Admin Center provide you with environment-level analytics based on your usage of the past 28 days. As your adoption grows, you might need customized dashboards that show you more insights and allow you to apply rich filters to your data. A core part of the CoE Starter Kit is a Power BI dashboard that provides you with a holistic view with visualizations and insights into resources in your tenant. Telemetry from the audit log is stored from the moment you set up the CoE Starter Kit, so over time you can look back and identify trends. The dashboard provides analytics and data for the following areas: monitor to give you an oversight of tenant resources, govern to drive actions through insights, and nurture to learn more about your community. The overview page provides you with a high-level overview of how many environments, makers, apps, and flows you have, and where your makers are based. If I look at the app overview page, I can see the total number of apps I have across all of my environments, the number of apps created this month, the number of app makers, and the breakdown between Canvas and model-driven apps. I can also identify my app creation trend, so I can see if my adoption is increasing. I can further filter down to identify specific departments that have a high usage of the Power Platform and see if I can offer additional training to them. If I look at flows, this similar information is available. So the total number of flows, flows created this month, the number of flow makers, how many UI flows I have, and the number of stopped and suspended flows. Flows end up in the suspended state if they are violating DLP policies or billing restrictions. So it's important to work with those makers to bring the flow back into an active state. As an admin, you will also want to use the insights you gather to drive actions, such as identifying critical, orphaned, and unused resources. The governance section of the Power BI dashboard allows you to carry out risk assessments based on viral sharing, connector operation usage, identify complex flows, and orphaned or unused resources. You can take action through an embedded app to take ownership, archive, or delete the resource. If we first look at the app risk assessment page, that gives you a list of all of your applications across all environments and a rich set of filters to drill down into those applications. One of the typical risk assessments that you as an admin would carry out is identifying resources that are shared with everyone in your organization. Resources shared and used by the entire organization might need a stronger support model or be moved to a dedicated environment. Sometimes apps are shared with the entire organization or a large number of individual users. If the app is for a dedicated department, job role, or group of people, you can help the maker by setting up an AD group to share their app with. Otherwise, your entire organization will see the app, even if it's not relevant for them, in the PowerApps mobile player or on make.powerapps.com. And if the user does not have access to the underlying data source, but only the app, they will receive an error message upon trying to launch the app, which can cause an increase in support tickets and confusion. Apps shared with a large number of individual users pose a different risk. If the app is for a specific job role or department, should an end user move departments or job roles, they would still see the app if it is shared with them and would be able to access all the information. Therefore, it would also be recommended to share the app with an AD group instead that is tied to a movers and leavers process. Some connectors, like the SQL connector used with SQL Server authentication, are implicitly shared with users. You can identify those apps by filtering them to display the ones that are using the SQL Server connector and make sure the maker is aware of the risk and help them mitigate it by enabling AAD authentication for SQL or moving the resource to a new environment with restricted maker access. Similarly, you can carry out flow risk assessments, for example identifying orphaned flows where the owner has left. Those flows will stop working. It is therefore important to identify those flows, check if they are still needed, and finding a new owner. You can do so by setting the creator to blank. Another risk assessment you want to carry out for flows is identifying flows that have been suspended. Flows are marked as suspended if they are in violation of DLP policies or billing restrictions. Work together with the maker to bring the flow back into an active state. Specific actions or connectors might require you to gather additional information from the maker or educate them on their usage. An example might be the forward email action or the Office 365 Outlook connector or HTTP requests. You can filter the action down to only display flows that use the HTTP request and reach out to those makers to get additional information about how they're using this action. Another frequent customer request is the ability for admins to identify unused flows and apps. Admins want to act by deleting or archiving those resources to avoid sprawl. One of the reasons for this is that unused resources that are still shared with users would still be accessible through the Maker portal and mobile apps and can lead to an untidy and unorganized user experience. To support this, we've introduced an archive score into the CoE Starter Kit. In short, the higher the score, the more likely you can archive the resource. The highest possible score for an app is 6. A score of 6 would represent an app that has not been modified since it was created, that is using a non-production word like test or demo in the title, and that has been created over 3 years ago and has likely been created from a template. If we hover over a specific application, we can get more insights into the archive score that that application has achieved. In this case, the application has not been modified since it was created, it's got a high H score and is most likely been created from a template. A typical activity for an admin would be to target apps with a high archive score and move them either into an archive or delete them from the environment. In the same sense, we've also got a flow archive score. The highest possible score for a flow is 7. A score of 7 would represent a flow that has not been modified since it was created, that is using a non-production word like test or demo in the title, that has been created over 3 years ago and has likely been created from a template, one that is in a stopped or suspended state, and one that is not complex, so it has less than 5 actions, for example. Again, if we hover over the flow name, we can get additional information about why that flow has achieved an archive score of 4. Drilling through to the app or flow details page provides you with rich information about a selected resource, as well as an embedded Power App that lets you immediately take action. You can grant yourself ownership or add other new users to this resource. You can email the maker, you can launch the maker portal, and you can delete the resource from here. It also shows you the connectors that are used as part of this resource and the individual actions that are being used. With the embedded app, you don't have to leave Power BI to take action. As you establish your Center of Excellence, a significant part of your activity will be nurturing your maker community, enabling them to follow best practices and working together with them to identify whether they or their resources need additional support. The Nurture section helps you find your app and flow champions, see what connectors they're using, where they are based, and how they are adopting the platform. If we first look at the maker overview page, I get a number of total app makers and total flow makers, how many apps and flows they have, their job titles, their city, country, and department. I can further identify trends, for example, identify departments that are actively using the Power Platform to see if I can share their success story with other departments or offer them additional training. Let's now look at some of the Canvas apps that are part of the core component solution. Let's first look at the Set App Permission app. In this application, I can select a specific environment and then apps in that environment to add permissions to that application. I can search for a user and I can select the user role. So are they a viewer, are they an editor, or do I want to change ownership of that application and make Lee the new owner of those applications? I can also search for owners. So for example, I know that Alex is about to leave the organization. He's built 2 applications here. I can select them and I can hand them over. And I can choose to hand them over to Adele. I can also look at orphaned apps, so applications where the owner has already left the organization. I can select them here, can launch the application to see what the application does. I can delete the application, or I can again add a new owner to that application. So for example, if I look for Megan, I can make Megan an owner of that application. Another app that's part of the core component solution is the DLP editor. This app helps you plan your DLP policies, identify apps that might break due to a change of your DLP policies, and mitigate the risk of those applications breaking by reaching out to the application owner. If I open the DLP editor, on the left-hand side I can see all the DLP policies in my environment. I've selected the default environment policy and I can see the connectors that are in the business data bucket and the ones that are in the non-business data bucket of that policy. I can see that this policy is currently applied to the Contoso default environment. If I wanted to apply that to a new environment, for example, the Contoso development environment, I can see the impact this change would have on the Contoso development environment. So I can see here, these are applications that are in the Contoso development environment that would stop working due to me applying the default environment policy to that environment. I can see the connectors that are impacted. So this application is using these connectors. And currently in my current setup, I've got this set of connectors in the business data bucket and the approvers connector in the non-business data bucket. In this example, here I can say this is actually an oversight on my part. The approvers connector should definitely be business data only. So I can move the connector here. I can see those applications are no longer impacted. Now I can see this application here. Is using these connectors here would be impacted by my policy. Well, actually I don't want Megan to use the Outlook.com connector. She should be using the Office 365 Outlook connector. So I can email her here and I can say, please use the Office 365 Outlook connector instead. I can send her the email and I can hold off making the change to the DLP policy until she has fixed her application. And then I look at the other application that's impacted. I can see this application is using these connectors as well as the Azure AD connector. There might be a legitimate business case for Megan to use the Azure AD connector in this application. However, in the default environment, I don't want to make the Azure connectors part of the business data bucket. So I will reach out to Megan again and I will say, let's look at moving this app to our prod environment, where the Azure connectors are part of the business data bucket. Now I can wait for Megan to fix these issues before saving the policy. So all I've done here is I've checked what impact the change in DLP policy would have on my tenant rather than actually making the change. I've successfully mitigated the risk of applications breaking due to the DLP policy change. Let's now start looking at the governance components of the CoE Starter Kit. One of those components details a sample app auditing process. The app auditing sample process showcases how your CoE department or IT administrators can automate an auditing process on an app-level basis to gather additional information about an app, like the business justification and the impact of an outage from the maker. The problem statement is that there are many apps in the Contoso tenant. IT doesn't know what all these apps are intended for or how to support individual apps when the help desk is called, and it's unclear whether all the apps are being maintained to any standard. They can see details like the description and the number of shared users, but they need to communicate directly with the app owner to fully understand the situation around these apps. Especially in a large organization like Contoso, it's not feasible for the IT team to be responsible for manually reaching out to each owner individually for the apps, and those details can't be stored in email conversations. The Contoso team would like to have a central app catalog for high-quality applications. The CoE team has therefore decided that there should be an auditing process on an app-level basis, using the Common Data Service as a data store for the business justification. They decide to use the power of the Power Platform to facilitate this process. A flow is used to iterate through all the apps in the tenant and check whether the apps are compliant. If the owner hasn't submitted a business justification and the app was shared broadly, the flow sends the owner an email to notify them that a specific app isn't compliant with Contoso's policies. The email contains a link to the Developer Compliance Center Canvas app, where the owner can provide the business justification. After the maker has proven compliance by adding these details, the admin can review those details and the app itself. A business process flow in the Power Platform admin view helps facilitate that process. In the Developer Compliance Center, they can see their own applications and the compliance status in the form of a traffic light of these applications. They can look at the details of an application and evaluate why their application has received a certain status. In this example here, the app description of the application is filled out, which is great. The app has been published within the last 60 days, which is also great, but the maker has not submitted the support details. From here, the maker can submit the support details. A maker will submit a business justification, access management, dependencies, business impact, data classification, and a category. The support details in your organization might be different from the ones in the template, but because we are providing you this as part of a template, you can modify all the fields here to suit your own requirement. Once the maker submits the support details, the app compliance is updated. From an admin point of view, an admin can use the model-driven Power Platform admin view to look at assessments that have been submitted. All of these will show up under the admin review view. They can look at the application, they can evaluate the general app details such as the connection references and who the application is shared with, and then they can look at the audit details, so the details that have been submitted through the support form by the maker. They can validate the maker requirements, they can assess the risk, and then highlight the application in the app catalog. Applications highlighted in the app catalog show in this Canvas app catalog that can be shared with the entire organization. Applications relevant for the entire organization or for a large user base can be highlighted here and launched from here. An app catalog can really help with the discoverability of your Power Apps. An important part of establishing your CoE is also nurturing your makers. So let's look at some of the nurture components available as part of the CoE Starter Kit. The first one is a welcome email, which sends an email to new makers, so makers who've created an app or flow for the very first time. The email contains resources, both external and internal ones, and invites makers to an internal community, for example on Teams or Yammer. You can completely customize this template to provide your makers the guidelines suitable for your organization. You will also want to look at sharing reusable components with your makers. These could be anything from brand guidelines, logos, pictures, to starter applications and flows. We're shipping the CoE Starter Kit with a template catalog that uses the SharePoint document library in the background for you to upload commonly used components. These can then be highlighted in the template catalog, and makers can download them and use them in their own applications. An important part of Nurture is also providing upskilling opportunities to your makers. This can be done in the form of internal App in a Day, Flow in a Day, or advanced Flow in a Day events. We've put together a lightweight conference-style application for you to offer training to your makers. We've got a registration app for makers to see the events that you're offering, select them to learn more about this, and register for the workshop. A management app in the background helps you set up those events and manage and communicate with the attendees. A couple of flows help with the communication to the attendees. For example, they send a registration confirmation, a reminder prior to the event, and a feedback reminder on the day of the event. One of the benefits of this is also that attendees of the event will have had an interaction with Flow and Power Apps before the event, so they can visualize what these tools could do for them. We've now looked at some of the components of the CoE starter kit, but there's definitely more for you to explore. There is no one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to establishing a CoE. However, we do hope that these templates provide inspiration and value on your journey to successful Power Platform adoption.